All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to today's episode of Life in HD, where we have special guests come on and chat with us about human design in real life. And if you're new to this channel, I'm your host, Crystal Alfarero. I'm a human design guide and founder of the Human Design Academy. And of course, today, backed by popular demand, we have our very special 2-4 reflector here, Shane McDermott, returning to the series to hang out with us and to catch up. So I'm really, really thankful that you're here, Shane. And I guess before we get in, what we're going to do is something a little bit different than what we normally do here on Life in HD, because Shane's going to share with us more of his reflector wisdom. And we're going to unpack and explore different metaphors and concepts that can be helpful for your own spiritual journey, especially if you're a reflector, but also if you're any of the other types like myself. So, first of all, welcome back, Shane. So nice to see you
Great.
again. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Yeah, really appreciate this an interview, the opportunity to meet with you again and explore the sort of reflector nuances in a different way. So grateful to be here with you.
Amazing. And I know that the last time that we were together, you shared a lot about your personal experience about being a reflector. And um, I don't think we got to talk about this much, but I wanted to talk about more around your work as a coach. So could you remind me a little bit about what you do and who it is that you serve? Because I know that, you started working with a lot of reflector clients as well.
Yeah. Thanks to our initial interview, there were several people that reached out and wanted to explore coaching together. So yeah, I've been pretty busy coaching, and not just reflectors. And I've been a coach pretty much my whole life. I've been a
Mhm.
solopreneur my whole life. I've been self-employed since I've been 17. I've had this real deep fascination, started mostly with the human body early on,
Mhm.
but then it just blossomed into the whole human experience. So over now 40 years, I've been exploring and weaving my way through many different paradigms of practice and study that really encompass our whole human experience, the complexity of just our human condition,
Mhm.
physically, vitally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So I've studied and practiced many different patterns. My coaching work is a reflection of that. It's a very eclectic mix of many different paradigms. It's mostly all online at this point.
Mhm.
If there's people that live in sort of the vicinity where I am, which is northern Arizona now, I love meeting with people in person, but most of my work is online.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not just, it's not counseling. It's very different than counseling. It's coaching, and it's helping people really look at and embrace their whole human experience, their physical bodies, the health and vitality and well-being of their physical bodies,
Mhm.
how to emotionally and energetically regulate and manage their vital energetic life force, how to work with expanded perspectives and perceptions through the mental field, and then how to access higher spiritual states so that then the lower dimensions, or not lower necessarily, the slower vibrations, slower vibrational experiences of our mind, our emotions, and our body manifest from a higher spiritual order once we can start to access those higher spiritual states.
Mhm.
So it looks very different for every single client. I
Yeah.
love working with reflectors because they're so fluid and malleable. And they're so willing and capable of flexing and flowing with whatever's present. So it's some of the most intriguing and sort of revelatory work that I do is with reflectors. I feel like I get as much out of the sessions as they do.
Yeah.
But I
So,
love working with all types. And it's not just human design types. It's
mhm.
anyone.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about what that's like for you as a reflector, getting to engage with other reflectors in such an intimate quote unquote container. I don't know if I like that word necessarily, but space maybe is the word that I'm
Yeah.
looking for, right? What's that like for you?
A lot of surprise.
Mhm.
a lot of surprise and spontaneity. There's things that
Mhm.
show up. It feels like the field is informing us. When my experience, and it's certainly not a all the time situation, but oftentimes with reflectors, when we can get out of our own way, we become open to a larger dynamic field of information and intelligence, that a
Mhm.
space that holds us both. And that space is alive and intelligent and rich with information
Mhm.
that independently we couldn't access. It's only when we create the connection through the reflection, through the reflector type, that the space seems to open up and download really amazing information and insights and intelligence that we couldn't have planned for. So it's a
Mhm.
lot of surprise, a lot of spontaneity, a lot of very fresh information that I find myself saying things and accessing wisdom that I I didn't know
Oh, wow.
prior to saying it. So it's
Mhm.
really fresh and enlivening.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I know like the last time you were on here, one of the things that you said um that still stuck to me this day was, being a reflector. And I'm thinking of this for myself as well, but as a reflector, it's important to make sure that you're wiping that mirror clean so that you have a clear reflection on what it is that you're taking in, what it is that you're, receiving. And so I really love that metaphor. And I know in your coaching work, you use a lot of these types of metaphors, to help guide people on whatever part of their spiritual journey that they're wanting assistance with, what they're wanting guidance with. And so, tell me a bit about, about the metaphors that you use, or like why you like to work with them.
Yeah, metaphors are really powerful because it feels like, and when I've received coaching, like I've done a lot of coaching, I've hired coaches to work with me, and the use of metaphors are really helpful because it gives me access to a seeing and experiencing myself that also creates space and separation. So it feels like I have room to move within the metaphor. It's not a personal label or attachment of who I am, but it's allowing me to see and experience myself through a metaphor that gives me space to experiment and experience new things. And in a slightly detached way, it's not
Mhm.
so personal, right? It's more transpersonal. I can see it as more um, like an analogy, or it's sort of transpersonal in a way that allows me to not take that on as a personal identity.
Mhm.
Uh, One of the metaphors I can remember one of my coaches giving me, this was back in 2009, was the way of the Bhakti temple sculptor, or the
Mhm.
way of the Bhakti bricklayer, where it would be just like Bhakti is the devotion of love, right? And as a bricklayer, each brick that I'm laying, that I'm building this temple of love, is done one at a time, very, very with deep presence and awareness, that each brick is laid with real intention. And it just allowed me to see and experience myself in a very different way, and in a
Mhm.
way that really opened my heart, but also called me into very precise presence of what I was doing moment to moment, brick by brick, moment by moment of life. So
Mhm.
they're really powerful that way. And I love using metaphors. And I think metaphors are really powerful for reflectors as well. I use a lot of metaphorical language with reflectors. One that I use is one of the as the harmonic self. And so what I
Mhm.
mean by that is, if we think of reality as this whole vibrational spectrum, that we come in with a very unique sort of energetic architecture, a vibrational signature, so to speak,
Mhm.
like that each person would come in being able to play one or two instruments of the whole vibrational symphony of life. right? And if we look at through the typology of human design, each typology comes into the vibrational spectrum of life, knowing how to attune to and align to a very specific vibrational frequency. That would be like
Mm-hmm.
knowing how to play a specific instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Unique thing about reflectors that I've learned about my own experience in working with reflectors, reflectors don't knowing how to play one or two instruments. They come in knowing how to access the vibrational score of life itself, and to be able to step into any situation and sort of attune to the frequency of that, like being able to step into a symphony and play any instrument, because we're sort of chameleons.
Yeah.
As reflectors, we can be chameleons or we could be visionaries.
Mm-hmm.
If we're chameleons, then we're just going to play the instrument that's expected of us, attune to the vibrational quality that's expected of us. And then we're just constantly blending in, and we're never really standing out, and we're never
Mm-hmm.
really taking full responsibility and embrace of our adaptive capacity to play the whole vibration score. As visionaries, if we assume the role of visionaries rather than chameleons, now we have this fluidity to be able to move in and out of any vibrational experience,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to adapt in real time to the vibrational architecture of what's needed in the moment,
Yeah.
not by what's expected of us.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it
Yeah.
changes completely the perception that you have depending on, how you approach playing each instrument, right? Is it because you think you should be playing that, or is it because it's something that you really want to embrace, right? And also not doing it because something is expected of you. We see that all the time in our reality, that we do certain things because we think we should, or someone else tells us that we're, good at XYZ, so we should be doing that. But the gift with reflectors and just, having that flexibility, that fluidity is that we're not, well, no, I say we as if I'm a reflector, but, you know, and I'm sure you can attest to this, that, you're here to sample a little bit of everything, depending
Yes.
on what's called for or whatever it is that you feel called towards, and not
Yes.
attach yourself to any one instrument, right? And I feel like that's what us as projectors sometimes tend to do, at least in the beginning of our experiment, and trying to play the same instruments as maybe a generator type would,
Right.
right? You
Yeah.
can think of, I imagine generators being like, I don't know, the trombone, or like, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the projectors being the flutes, and manifestors being the percussion, like the drums, and that heavy kind of impactful sound, right?
Yeah.
But when we try to play something that maybe isn't attuned to our energy, to ourselves, it's like something doesn't feel right, right? Something doesn't feel good.
Yeah. We're
If
out
a,
of attunement. And
yeah, exactly.
yeah, and it's picked up as like we're playing off tone, right?
Yeah.
Because so much of what life does is it hands us sort of a, a song to play. It's like, here's your song, play it. This is what's
Hmm.
expected of you. This is your instrument. This is your song. This is what you play. And so what I'm suggesting isn't just for reflectors. Maybe perhaps reflectors have a little bit more fluidity and latitude to move across the vibrational spectrum,
Hmm.
but I think every type should call into question the expectation of what they're expected to play in life, the
Hmm.
role, the music they're expected to play. They come in with a very specific vibrational frequency or instrument, self as instrument, harmonic self,
Hmm.
and we can start to experiment and explore new ways of attuning to the higher order of the symphony. It's like so often family and peers, professional groups, sort of hand us a role or a musical score to play, and that's what's expected of us. Instead, we can recognize, oh, we're a finely tuned instrument that can also attune to the greater symphony of life and start
Mhm.
to recognize, what does the moment want us to express through our unique vibrational qualities, and start to experience and explore that. And I think
Mhm.
that's what reflectors have the opportunity to do, and have a lot of fluidity to be able to do that and
Yeah.
move across the whole vibrational spectrum and attune to a higher order of the symphony rather than this sort of human-centric
Mhm.
symphony of life. I think so through human design and through so many other typologies, we sort of get locked in this human-centric notion that we create life through this human-centric perspective. And
Mhm.
there's a much larger vibrational spectrum playing out, symphony playing out of all life.
Yeah.
And every type can attune to that through their unique vibrational architecture.
Mhm.
Reflectors maybe have just a little bit more latitude, but we can all do it.
Yeah.
That's what is important to recognize. That's the symphony we should start to be playing and attuning to, because the human-centric score is built on the story of separation and lack
Mhm.
and deficiency, where the vibrational score of life, or the symphony of life, is based on abundance, wholeness, and coherence.
Mhm.
So when we start to attune to that symphony, we start to untap our infinite potential of wholeness and coherence. And we feel it. It's
Yeah.
unmistakable. When we're
Oh, for
playing to
sure.
a larger vibrational score, we feel more coherent and complete and whole in our experience. When we're
Mhm.
playing these human-centric roles and bound to rules of linear time and space, we feel incoherent. We feel disconnected.
Mhm. Yeah. And I love the analogy of the symphony because sometimes we forget that we play, like you said, we're part of a whole, right?
Yeah.
We're not so much you're a reflector, I'm a projector, and, Joe is a generator, but we all have different roles that we play together, right? To
Yes.
for this common um whether it's symphony that we want to call it, right? This
Yeah.
common goal or this common, we are all one in that aspect. We're all just part of a different, different parts of an ecosystem that bring us together. And I feel like when we recognize the different roles that people play, um, even when we compare it to like the symphony, right? Each instrument has a different role or a different, beautiful sound that it can play and a beautiful part that it plays. And without one, it's not as complete as it could be, or it's not as mm, sometimes it can feel like something's missing, but you appreciate more when you're attuned to your role and you feel good about your role. You feel empowered in the role that you're in. You have a greater appreciation for what it is that you do, what you contribute, and also what others do as well, even if it's totally different than
Yes.
your own. But at the same time, you're still moving towards the same thing. And that's being in harmony with each other, being in harmony to create this symphony, right?
Yes. Yes. And it's about being in harmony with all of life, right?
Hmm.
It's not just with other
Yeah.
humans.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
for sure.
much larger vibrational spectrum that we can be in harmony with. And
Hmm.
it's really important. This is why the higher spiritual realms are very important, because if you think about um, just the analogy of freedom and fullness, we'll use
Hmm.
those simple distinctions. Freedom would be the formless realm. In a lot of spiritual traditions, like in Buddhism, that's called emptiness or the 0 point field.
Hmm.
Um, it's free. It's free from the world of form, the world of all form, whether it's physical, material form, mental form, emotions, energy. We're just free. And when we're in that 0 point field of freedom, that becomes a source of intelligence and information in which the whole field of fullness arises out of that as an expression.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be like the calm stillness before the symphony actually starts to play. You can feel the field is rich with information, intelligence, creativity, emergent possibility, but it's free. It's
Mm-hmm.
formless. And then music starts to emerge out of that. Vibrational information starts to emerge out of that in the material world, in the energetic world, in the mental, in the mental and emotional world. And it's really important, I think, for all types, but particularly reflectors that come in with sort of a lack of definition. I
Mm-hmm.
think we have access to that 0 point or freedom field quite easy.
Mm-hmm.
If we take on the conditioning of the small p program, we fill that freedom up with all these expectations of how then we become chameleons. And then
Mm-hmm.
we're just filling roles of what's expected of us.
Mm-hmm.
Lose the freedom perspective, and we just get lost in the fullness, in all the different um, roles that we're expected to fulfill as reflectors. So
Yeah.
I think it's really important for all types, but particularly reflectors, to have this is cleaning the mirror. Again, going back to that analogy, it's like clean the mirror of all the small p programming, expectations, roles, assumptions of who we are, what we should be, how we should be defined, and come back to this freedom state. It's a deep presence that's clear of any expectation. And we function from there. And then we can
Mm-hmm.
start to take access information that is a higher order information, not just the roles and the scripts that we're handed and expected to play. We're able to start to access a higher order of information and intelligence that connects us to the wholeness. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when we can really function in deep coherence.
Yeah,
I think that's when reflectors have in really profound wisdom to share.
absolutely. I mean, you're so receptive. And what was the term you used?
0 point field.
Point field? Yeah.
So
I
the
read, I was
sorry,
gonna say,
yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'll add to it once you're done.
Okay. No, I was just gonna say as a projector that has a lot of, well, first of all, has a lot of root pressure, has a lot of masculine energy in my design. I really resonated with this. And I feel like a lot of my clients that I work with on a business side can resonate with this too, because a lot of, I'm going to say, like, especially any non-energy type. So projectors, manifestors, reflectors, we tend to get very overwhelmed sometimes, right? And overstimulated when we're caught up in the fullness. And we worry about, like, okay, well, what's that next thing I should do? Or, what am I doing wrong? Or, like, I don't have enough time to do all this other stuff, or I'm not feeling inspired. And ironically, the solution to understanding and getting clarity on what that next step is not to do more.
Yeah,
It's to take a step back and do less, find that time and space for stillness. Because, and I always like to use this analogy of like a cup, right? A glass full of water. You can't pour more into a glass that's already full. It's going to overflow, and that's not good, right? It doesn't serve anyone. I mean, it's just kind of wasted water.
yeah,
And so, in order to be able to add more onto your plate, or, create something new, we need to create space for that first. So I love that analogy of the 0 point field, if I'm understanding it correctly, right?
you are. You are. Yeah. Yeah. And to use your visual of the cup overflowing, imagine like an empty cup. which is receptive. That's the field of receptivity. If it's empty and we're truly still and quiet in that space, imagine the cup just emerging fullness instead of being poured into it. It
Mm-hmm.
just gradually fills up
Mm-hmm.
through a higher order of intelligence and information and creativity and wisdom. And this is, yeah, I think this needs to be sort of the basis of operation for all types, that
Mm-hmm.
we are able to access this 0 point field or emptiness state or still point, so that what emerges is not just our expectations and our grabs and what's expected of us, that we just get filled up by society. We allow creativity to emerge out of that
Mm-hmm.
stillness, out of that presence. And that's the information and intelligence that informs our purpose, our focus, our intention, our goals, rather than it being fulfilled through grab at what we perceive we're missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're going back to this before, if we're empty and empty is perceived as lack or deficiency, then we're constantly grabbing at the fullness of reality out of this perceived sense of lack or deficiency. Instead, if we can function from this 0 point field from a place of curiosity and wonder, then
Mm-hmm.
we can allow emergence to happen, allow emergence to inform our fullness in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And with reflectors having a lack of definition, I feel like this is easier access for us, but it's every type is capable of this, every single
Mm-hmm.
type. This is not unique to reflectors. We
Mm-hmm.
just have a different relationship to it.
Yeah. And do you find that for you, being a reflector, how, I mean, sorry, I'm just kind of like thinking out loud here. But do you feel like you need your space? Do you need to have your alone time in order for you to be able to access that space, right?
Yeah.
Is that a key
For
part
me
of
personally,
getting there?
yes.
Hmm.
Yes, for me personally, I do. This is a big part of my nature photography. The photo you're seeing behind me is one that I took here in
Oh, it's
Flagstaff
beautiful.
area.
I thought it was a painting.
No, it's a photograph
Oh,
of
it
the
looks so
aspen trees
cool.
up at Lockett Meadow in
Oh,
northern
wow.
Arizona. And this is a really good metaphor. We can just use this photo. I use this photo as a guided meditation with a lot of my clients. It's like we look at that and go, oh, look at the beautiful trees. That's the fullness. But if you actually look at the space in between the trees, that's the emptiness. And there's a lot more space than there are trees.
Hmm.
And nature is my reminder of that. Nature is my way into that, of accessing the space in between. The space in
Hmm.
between is a really powerful experience and realization. And that's the freedom state. That's the 0 point field.
Hmm.
Infinity state is all the trees. That's the multiplicity of endless forms. And each one of those trees could be a different person in your life, a different goal in your life, a different timeline in your life. It's, the infinity state is basically all the fullness of our lives through the whole chronological timeline of our lives. But between every single event of fullness or perspective of fullness is space in between. And
Hmm.
that's what we have to drop into as reflectors, and I think all types, that becomes our basis of operation. And it's not, and in that spacious still point, there's a receptivity, not a deficiency. If we're resting in that space out of deficiency, then we're grabbing at forms. We're
Hmm.
grabbing at whatever fullness we can get. If we're resting in that 0 point state from a place of receptivity, curiosity, wonder, awe, then forms emerge, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a higher order intelligence that transcends our human-centric experience. This is cosmocentric information and intelligence that has a higher purpose for us as human beings. And if we're still and receptive to that information, that's what emerges out of that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That
Then we
reminds
can,
me.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go, Gwen.
And then when that information and intelligence emerges out of that clearing or 0 point state, we start to recognize what of the information that emerges is aligned with our unique vibrational architecture.
Mm-hmm.
That defines our purpose. That defines our goals. That defines who we engage with and who we don't engage with. That's
Yeah.
the harmonic stuff that is
Yes.
attuned to the vibrational architecture of intelligence. And we can attune to that. Any type can attune to that. But we have to
Mm-hmm.
find the clearing, the spaciousness, the still point in order
Yeah.
to be receptive and actually have that information and intelligence register in our personal field.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me so much. And this was exactly what I was going to say earlier. I think it ties in perfectly with what you were saying. I was just going to say it reminded me so much of the Open Head Center in human
Mm-hmm.
design, right? Thinking about
Yes.
things that don't matter, taking in all these thoughts and inspirations from outside and, in your environment and just being like overwhelmed and jammed packed, I'm going to say caught up in all the shiny objects,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the way to, it's not about I mean, if you're not aware of that, it's easy to try to pull on all that fullness, like you were
Yeah.
saying, and try to grasp onto all these things out of this place of maybe fear or out of this place of maybe like shoulds, right? But not from that aligned, attuned place, right? And
Yeah.
so, what's important for anyone with that open head is to really lean into that authority so that you can find that spaciousness, so that the clarity can emerge, especially if you're an emotional being, right? Waiting for that emotional clarity and not just jumping into all of these different things right away, but really giving yourself that time so clarity can emerge over time. Letting that nervousness settle, letting that excitement settle a little bit so that you can see what's still clear for you, what's still in alignment with that harmonic self. Um, and yeah, I mean, that same kind of idea can apply to any authority, right? Giving yourself that space, that stillness, so that you can maybe see or hear or feel more clearly around what it is that is the right thing for you and not get kind of caught up in all the fullness, all the ideas, all the overwhelm. Especially now with social media, right? We're kind of bombarded with with information,
Yeah.
and it makes us feel like we need to grasp onto everything that we see, right? I mean, it's all about selling us stuff a lot
Yeah.
of the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And from sort of the consumer culture, wherever we have empty centers, it's going to try to be filled with stuff that is, and if we're coming from a perceived sense of lack or deficiency, then we're going to buy it. Literally,
Mhm.
we're going to want to fill our empty centers with stuff, mental, emotional stuff, physical stuff, material stuff,
Mhm.
consumer stuff, entertainment stuff, whatever it is. So when we can start to drop into a true place of stillness and quietude, then we can
Mhm.
start to recognize our open centers as centers of emergence,
Mhm.
centers of wonder, of curiosity,
Yeah.
of fresh forms that
Mhm.
can come in ways that really surprise us, that break sort of the normatives and conditioning we've been set up to believe that we need.
Mhm.
So wherever and whatever type you are and whatever centers are open, use that as sort of these receptivity fields of fresh, novel emergence. And don't fill them with stuff.
Mhm.
Keep them open until something new, fresh, and novel arrives. arises in that center, and then
Hmm.
start to be curious about that.
Yeah.
That's coming
Um,
from a higher order of intelligence, and it's not coming from the grab of deficiency or lack or fear.
mhm. You can feel the difference. I mean,
Yes, yes,
it's a totally different energy that you bring with what it is that you're wanting to create. And even engaging in it in that creative process. If you're creating something from this place of fear, of urgency, of like grasping onto something, it doesn't feel great creating it. And it doesn't feel, you don't feel confident talking about it. It just, there's so much heavier energy that's attached to it that kind
yeah.
of blocks that creative process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of expectation and a lot of history that burdens that form that comes in. This is another really important thing that I would like to talk about is
Hmm.
different quality and experiences of time and space,
Hmm.
because this is really powerful for all types and particularly reflectors. When we get caught in this separate self sense, then in the human centric story of separation and lack, we're stuck in chronological time and space. And what I want to outline today is 3 ways that we can experience time and space. What we typically think of from sort of our human centric experience and separate self sense is that chronological time is linear, that chronological time and space is linear, and it unfolds from past, present to future. And so what I'm going to say is I'm going to offer 3 different ways that we can experience time and space, and just take these lightly. They're not like, they're
Hmm.
meant to be invitations, not facts.
Hmm.
But they really, once I walk you through it, you're going to start to recognize how different experiences you've had can really resonate with one of these 3.
Hmm.
And then they start to become more palpable and alive and accessible. We think of chronological time, linear time and space, as having past, present, and future.
Hmm.
And this is where our separate self functions. And when we experience, and I'm going to use a couple of metaphors. When we experience this, imagine a film strip. Like, I'm pretty sure in modern movie theaters they don't use it anymore, but just a few years ago they had these big rolls of film
Yeah.
that you'd have movies on, feature length movies. So imagine this big roll of film is your life, and you want it to better understand a past situation when you were a child. Maybe it was a childhood trauma. You have to go through the film strip of your whole life, going year by year, month by month, day by day, moment by moment, until you get, oh, there's that moment when I was 7 years old. This happened. This is
Hmm.
why I can't move on with life. This is why I feel fear around this situation. And in order to experience that, we have to go back through chronological time and space to that particular time and space event to better understand it. And then if we want to move forward, we have to go back through the whole chronological timeline of our life. It's laborious, it's energetically dense, it's a very low vibration way of moving through past,
Hmm.
present, and future.
Hmm.
What we can also start to recognize is there's a cyclical nature of time. And
Hmm.
we see this in nature repeating all the time. The
Yeah.
seasonal cycles of summer, spring, fall, winter, and they cycle through over and
Yeah.
over. You can see it through the transits and the planetary movements of, of the sun and the moon and all the planets. They move in cycles. You see it through migration patterns of animals and birds across the planet. You see it in um, flora species as they bloom every springtime. The flowers bloom. They don't bloom in the winter, but every spring, there they are. And we can start to see, as we go through this film strip of our life, reoccurring events. patterns, repeat patterns. That was like, we can think of relationships, good one for this, because we go, why do I keep repeating the same thing in relationships over and over? I keep
Mm-hmm.
repeating it. It's like, well, we get to revisit that lesson over and over again until we learn it. This is the cyclical nature of time,
Mm-hmm.
repeating patterns of time. But there's also a third way we can experience time, which is what I call resonant time or stack time. If we stay with the metaphor of the movie strip, and a lot of this work is informed through Ibrahim Karim, through
Mm-hmm.
biogeometry, which I've studied for years. And he uses this metaphor. And I'm going to use, so I'll leverage his metaphor here and unpack it, and then I'll offer a different metaphor. But I wanted to acknowledge the source of this
Mm-hmm.
is through Ibrahim Karim and biogeometry.
Mm-hmm.
And what he would then say is, if you want to experience time in a different way, imagine taking the whole film strip, the whole chronological film strip of your life, and cutting it up frame by frame by frame and stacking it. It's going to be a very high stack. But now every single experience is available whenever you want it. You don't have to go back through the whole timeline. If you want to understand the repeating patterns of your life, you can pull out all the patterns that have similar qualities. If you want to understand, like, think of um, high spiritual states or times in nature or deep love relationships, have a vibrate quality to it, a resonant frequency to it that leaves a very palpable imprint in our
Mm-hmm.
minds, our bodies, and our heart and our nervous system. Think of sort of like the most extraordinary moments of your life. Um, for me, a lot of time, a lot of those experiences are time in nature, but particular partnerships of deep love and affection, those stand out as having a very unique vibrational quality. If we stack, if we can see the experiences of our lives as vibrational qualities, we can access that vibrational quality whenever we want. We don't have to go through the
Mm-hmm.
whole chronological timeline. And this is a very interesting way to experience time, because in chronological time, linear time, I'm going to say this slow because this is really important. Space is infinite, time is finite.
Mm-hmm.
In linear time and space, space is infinite, time is finite. So that means, and from the human-centric story of separation, that we're separate from everything around us, if we want to move from this space to that space, maybe it's a goal, a business goal, maybe it's a relationship goal. We want to move from this space in separation to that space in separation. We have to move with greater velocity because
Mm-hmm.
time is finite. We only have a limited amount of time. From linear time and space, time is limited. So in order to get from this space, present, to that space, future, I've got to move quicker. I've got
Mm-hmm.
to do more. I've got to move with greater velocity. When from cyclical time, we start to see that both time and space are fluid and
Mm-hmm.
repeating. They're fractal. They reoccur in patterns. Then we don't have to move with greater velocity from this space to that space. We can wait
Mm-hmm.
because we know it's going to recur. It's
Yeah.
going to happen again. You know, if you miss summer vacation this time, you can wait and you'll get a chance at it next year because it
Mm-hmm.
comes back again. Creative cycles, relationship cycles, cycles of abundance, cycles of health, they all recur in patterns. So we can start to relax a little bit when we can start to recognize the important things in life reoccur. We get
Mm-hmm.
new opportunities in new ways. So we can start to be more patient. In resonant time, it flips. Time is infinite, spaces are finite. Time is infinite, mean we have all the time in the world. There is no lack of time. Spaces are finite. And when we start to recognize the quality of our presence, if we're in this 0 point field of stillness, and we are open to greater sources of information and intelligence, and we're open to the higher vibrational score of life, it leaves a vibrational imprint in our bodies, in our minds, in our heart. That vibrational imprint creates a resonant frequency that we can recreate any space we want. We can bring that same vibrational intention, that same resonant frequency into every space. Now we don't, as reflectors, this is important, really important, because we're told as reflectors that we have to wait for the lunar cycle. That's cyclical time, okay? If we can start to imprint the resonant frequency and function as the harmonic self, we can start to imprint the vibrational frequency of life, of high vibrational creativity, wisdom, emergent possibility, wonder. We can imprint that into our body mind. And because time is infinite, we can move from space to space whenever we want. We don't actually have to wait for the cycles. We can take that vibrational imprint and bring it into any space of our life through our intention. Once we learn how, through our breath, our body, our movement, our intention, we can bring that vibrational quality into the vibrational architecture of any space. We no longer have to wait these 28 days. I'm not saying it's negated completely, because all of these exist simultaneously. It's not, we're getting rid of linear time and space, and we're getting rid of cyclical time and space. We're only going to function in resonant time and space. It's not like that. It's the whole matrix. It's the fractal nature. It's a both and, or all three and. But we can start to recognize we have more fluidity than we think we do. According to the rules of human design, we have to wait 28 days. You have to just wait and bear it through. And it's like, that's not my experience.
Yeah. And I know a lot of reflectors that have that same experience as you as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's a fluidity. We have access. Once we can learn to access sort of the vibrational imprint and information, that's fluid. We can move it, we can bring that vibrational quality into any time and space that we want. It takes practice, it takes consistency, it takes experience. Really, the fundamental root practice for reflectors that I work with, I keep guiding them into that, and I keep guiding myself into that. It's I don't have it by any means, but when it happens, it's really powerful.
And is there something that you do or would recommend to reflectors to, I guess you could say, imprint, a
Yes.
certain experience or sensation or feeling?
Yes. Really good question. What we'll start to notice, we'll call, when we're functioning in sort of a higher order self, or what I call the harmonic self, where we're attuned to the vibrational architecture of the moment and what's needed in the moment, when we're functioning, when that's more foreground, and cyclical self and chronological separate self are functioning more background, they're all three are present in this metaphor. All three are always present, but it becomes a foreground background experience. When the harmonic self is foreground and the cyclical self and separate self are background, we think differently, we behave differently, we move our bodies differently, we talk differently. What we have to start to recognize is that when the separate self becomes foreground and the resonant self we forget, or the harmonic self we forget, and the cyclical time we forget, and we're just functioning from separate self, start to recognize there's very habitual ways that we language, there's familiar stories, there's familiar emotions, there's familiar thought patterns. These are all what keeps us stuck in the separate self. There's particular ways we breathe, there's particular ways we posture and gesture with our bodies. It's a very recognizable, finite, contracted sense of self, seen and experienced through our bodies, our behaviors, our language, our emotions, our thoughts, our stories. Start to recognize when those start to come online, because that's when the separate self is going to come foreground and start to drive the bus of your life. And that ends up being a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to learn to relax into the zero, into the freedom,
Hold on.
into
Sorry,
emptiness.
Shane. Could you just repeat that last part? You froze a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
So when we can start to step a into a self that is freer, that functions more from the 0 point field, then the grab of the separate self starts to soften. And we can start to relax. We feel it in our nervous system. We feel it in our breath. We feel it in our thought streams. Our mental field starts to quiet. Our nervous tension and anxieties start to soften and release, so that we start to become more curious and receptive to life rather than grabbing at life. From
Mm-hmm.
the separate self, we're grabbing at life. From the cyclical self, there's more wonder, more curiosity, more receptivity, more relaxation. And we feel that in our bodies, in our minds, in our breath. When the harmonic self comes online, we feel free and spacious. We
Mm-hmm.
feel completely open to new experiences. Our language is reflected in that. Our breath is open and expansive. Our body seems relaxed. Muscle tension in our body seems soft. We behave differently. We move our body through space differently. Everything's different. This is what we have to start to, this is the remembering, or the imprinting, as I call it, so that we start to notice how we language differently, how we perceive life differently, how open we are to others, other people's feedback, other people's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And to imprint that, that's the remembering, so that we learn to practice and function in that way of being, so that's what creates the resonant vibrational quality of the harmonic self. And we feel connected and attuned to the greater vibrational spectrum of life itself, all of life. We no
Mm-hmm.
longer feel cut off and separate and incoherent. We feel deeply coherent. It's reflected through our sleep cycles,
Mm-hmm.
how we eat. From the separate self, we start to look at how do we eat from the separate self. It's a lot of grab at emotional eating and comfort
Mm-hmm.
food and addictions. And from a coherent self or harmonic self, we participate with life on every level differently. We we participate with food differently. We participate with social situations differently, with creative processes differently.
Mm-hmm.
So this is part of the imprinting, is becoming very hyper aware and receptive, and noticing when these three selves go foreground, background, so that we can practice and around, so that it's leading the purpose and drive of our life.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, I mean, I kind of do something similar for myself as a little ritual, to kind of tap into a certain space before each one of my readings or anytime I have a client call. Um, and it's just that idea of like intention setting. It's all, I mean, I don't know if I should call it a prayer, but I feel like I do a little prayer
Yeah.
before every session, and just set my intentions through there, do my little kind of like chat with the universe. And um, literally, when I open my eyes, it's like I'm in a new
Yeah.
dimension. Maybe not dimension, but I'm just in a totally different state. And it's like I'm locked in. Whereas if I don't, sometimes I notice if I'm skipping my intentions, if I'm not taking that space to breathe and to tap into that state again, not that it doesn't come back, but it just feels different, right? It's not the same. It takes me a little bit longer to get back in that zone and that flow. But I do notice a difference a lot. And going back to what you were mentioning around, experiencing time in these three ways. So linear, cyclical, and I think resonant was the last
Yeah.
one that you mentioned. I can't help but compare this to what we call the format energies in the human design chart, right? So we have, our logical type of energy. We see that in the 52-9, right? The channel of concentration. It's a very focused and linear and logical type of energy, right? And it formats the rest of that particular circuit group in the chart to be linear, logical, focused on patterns, etc. And it's very future oriented, right? So kind of starting from where you are and then going in a linear fashion into the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
Whereas on the opposite side of that, we have the channel of maturation, which is the 53, 42. So basically, the three channels, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but the three channels that connect the root to the sacral. And so this particular format channel is all about experiential cycles, right?
Mhm.
So cyclical time,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, starting a new chapter, ending a chapter, starting a new chapter, ending a chapter. Sometimes themes within those chapters repeat itself until we learn that lesson, until something happens, right? Or maybe, we're retested at a
Yeah.
different point in our lives. And so I see that being very much tied to like the cyclical time that we experience.
Yeah.
And then in the middle, we have the channel of mutation. And it's all about like, well, first of all, the type of format, the energy it is, it's like an off and on pulse, right? But in terms of time, it relates to like the now, the present, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, being able, so it's not all the experiences in any kind of linear fashion, but it's all kind of stacked on top of each other. And it's something that we can access. And, any one of these things we can access in the now.
Yeah.
And so I love how we can find these kind of correlations between
Yeah.
human design and, these beautiful concepts and metaphors that you're sharing with us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really telling in a deeper truth, right? Because a lot of the great wisdom traditions and deep typologies like human design or gene keys, these are, this is like, this is cosmic information. This is cosmic truth. And it's showing up in different traditions and different paradigms in slightly different ways, but they're the same thing. It
Hmm.
speaks the same
Yeah.
thing. And what I love about, what did you call the third one? The, uh,
The format, it's like an
yeah,
off and on pulse. It's the channel of mutation.
yeah, yeah. So you had called this, that third quality. Remind me once more, please.
Oh yeah. So
The
it's like spontaneous in the now, the channel of mutation, right? And just
channel
it
of
formats
mutation.
that entire circuit group to be
Yeah,
focused on the present, right? In the now. It's kind of has
right,
that general theme, right? Pulsating
right.
off and on.
Okay, yeah. So when we're in that channel of mutation, or what I'm calling resonant time,
Hmm.
what ends up happening is the whole chronological timeline of past, present, and future, and it all becomes available right now,
Hmm.
which is really powerful when we can learn to function and imprint that resonant quality into our way of being. Then the future is, sorry, the present has the future built into it, so that we don't actually have to wait for the future. This is what I call like the cosmic zip file of
Mm-hmm.
divine information that's preloaded into the present moment. The emergent future and the evolutionary possibilities of the emergent future are preloaded into the present moment. If we're functioning in chronological time or the separate self, we can't access that kind of information or intelligence. We just simply have to wait for the future to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We can function from the resonant or the harmonic self through resonant time, the cosmic zip file, or the information and intelligence, the higher order of information and intelligence, becomes available to us in the present moment. All the emergent possibilities of the future become available to us now. Then we can start to create from the emerging future. Now we can start to visualize and call in the emerging future now. But we have to learn to, this is part of the practice. And I love what you said about, the ritual. Before every session, I do the same thing. I go out in the sun and I say a prayer
Mm-hmm.
before every session. And I'm calling in a greater source of intelligence and information. And this becomes part of the ritual behavior of the harmonic self.
Mm-hmm.
Separate self wouldn't do that. It's not recognizing
Yeah.
a greater source of intelligence and information outside of myself. I'm it. As separate self, I'm it. As harmonic self, we recognize there's a vast field of information and intelligence that
Mm-hmm.
we have access to.
Yeah.
So it's through ritual and reverence of the moment and the mystery of the moment. That's what also comes preloaded into the present moment through higher order information and intelligence is mystery. And mystery gives us immense creative latitude of what can happen in our emerging future.
Mm-hmm.
So practice just becomes about bringing the harmonic self front and center as foreground, not background, that we remember that and imprint that into every moment so that we have access to past, present, and future right now, all at once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, if we were to translate harmonic self into human design terms, I see this as like the true self, the aligned self, right? Are we on
Yes.
the same page with that or?
Same page, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it's our true nature. Yes.
Hmm.
And when we're functioning from that spacious still point, from the freedom, then we are functioning as our authentic self or our true nature. And then the cosmos can really have its way with us.
Hmm.
Then we become the point the cosmos is trying to make every moment because we're available to the information and intelligence of the emerging future now.
Hmm.
So that, and yeah, it's just a remembering of that. That is when we know we're in our true nature. When new ideas, new language, new behaviors, new perspectives, new ways of being just sort of show up. It's like, where did that come from? I hear myself saying stuff in coaching sessions where it's like, I've never even thought of that. It's like,
Hmm.
that's so amazing. But there it is. It just
Surprise,
shows up.
surprise. Yeah.
Surprise, right?
Hmm.
Where the separate self is driving the bus and foreground, what as reflectors and what I experience is a lot of disappointment because
Hmm.
I know what's going to show up. I have a high degree of certainty and skepticism of life and myself, and of course I'm going to be disappointed.
Hmm.
So it's that itself to go to the back of the bus and no longer drive the bus, let our true nature, our authentic self, our harmonic self, sort of drive the bus
Hmm. Yeah.
of our lives. And it's going by sort of the GPS, the God positioning system
Yeah. It's funny
of that
because,
information and intelligence.
yeah, no, like what you're saying is just saying the same things that, I mean, when we look at the concept of like the magnetic monopole in human design as the driver, as this thing that's kind of like stringing us through life. And also the idea that we're here to align to our body and allow our body to do the driving, or, to kind of move us through and not have the mind be in control. Right. So it
Yeah,
kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying as well. So I love seeing this wisdom kind of laid out in different ways.
I love the parallels that you're bringing to human design. It's really rich. It just, yeah, it brings a lot of nuance and differentiation, but also real strong parallels, sort of undeniable parallels to
Hmm.
the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Shane. Like that. Oh my gosh. Like when we started this session, and actually, I guess before we started recording today, I told Shane, I'm like, I had a really long day. I mean, I've been up since 7 and it's been like nonstop for me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure how much energy I'm gonna have, but we'll kind of go with the flow here and we'll see how things go. And just after like not even 5 minutes of speaking with you, I feel like just that heaviness of the day was lifted. You have like incredible energy, Shane. I don't know what it is. I don't know if like other people tell you that all the time, but um there's just something so refreshing about being able to talk to you, and you know, you hold such a safe space for this conversation. I always get a little nervous sometimes when we talk about these esoteric themes because I feel like there's a part of me that I don't know, it's like, what if I don't understand what he's saying? Or like, what if I say something wrong? Right. But you hold such a beautiful space for me to just get to explore different concepts with you, different metaphors with you. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you bringing all this wisdom with us here as well.
Mm.
And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about as well to share with us is, how can people get in touch with you to learn more about what you do and to continue this process of growth
Yeah.
and, exploration?
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, Crystal, for acknowledging just the liveliness of this space that we created. And we created it. I would really, yes, I had something to contribute, but you also led it beautifully. Your questioning and your curiosity and your receptivity and profound understanding and insights into human design really wove together a beautiful um, net information that sort of is very, yeah, it's beautiful. I think you did it was a big part of you leading the conversation. So I want to acknowledge you in this as well. Um,
Oh, thank you.
yes, and if people are interested in getting in contact with me, I'll leave my contact information with Crystal. My website is awakenedwisdombody.com. That's what I call my coaching is serious wanting to jump in again. That's what I call my coaching practice, Awakened Wisdom Body
Yeah.
Coaching. So
Awesome.
we can maybe include a link from my website and my email if people want to get in contact with me. Um,
Yeah.
Gladly explore coaching with anyone that's interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know some beautiful connections were formed from the last time, and I'm, hoping for more for you as well, Shane. And I appreciate all the value that you've brought in us today. So, again, hopefully this is not the last time. I know
Yes,
there's going to be more to explore, and um, you know, when the time's right, when life cycles us back together again, we'll come
yeah,
back for another episode.
perfect. Sounds great, Crystal. I really appreciate you. I'm grateful for having this opportunity to spend time with you and share our knowledge and wisdom together.